working on the engine. We got some parts. I didn't buy new main bearings because they didn't look that bad, and there are shims in here. So I thought, well, I've got shims to play with. We'll see what happens. And what I'll do is I'll plastic gauge them, see where they stand, and go from there. Well, I'm looking through the book to see what the tolerances are, and basically it tells you to adjust the main bearings. You loosen all the main bearings, take one of them, tighten it to torque, and if there's no significant drag on the crankshaft, take them out, remove a pair of shims, put it back on, tighten it to torque until there's just noticeable, if any, drag on the crankshaft. Then you loosen those back up, move on to the next bearing, same scenario. You remove shims until you start to feel a slight drag on the crankshaft. And then after you get them all done, one at a time, you torque them all to specs, and as long as it's not locked up and you can still turn the crankshaft, you're good to go. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to clean these all up, install them one by one. This one is done. I've installed it. I torqued it. I did remove a pair of shims. And it seems to be pretty good. I removed the second set of shims and it locked the crankshaft on me. Just finished with this one. I wound up with this one, and I went ahead and did it to this one too. We got one shim in this side on each one. No shim, no shim, no shim, one shim, one shim, one shim. It seemed to work pretty good. I haven't torqued them all to 110 yet. This end is torqued. This one is there. Yeah, see, the table wants to roll around on me. I got to get this from a different angle. I know I've already torqued this, but that's 110, and we're good. All right. So now we're going to go to this one. That should be about 80. We're still good. There's 110 there. Come around here and stand right in front of you just because I can. That one's 110, and we're just barely starting to feel a little drag, which is not a bad thing. A little drag won't hurt. A little drag will do ya. Okay, we're feeling good, looking good. You see it stops spinning pretty quick. It could have a little more drag on it, but you know what? We're dealing with shims here. Actually, I'm pretty impressed for as old as this motor is, that these bearings, those shims can actually take care of the problem. I think it feels pretty good to me. But anyway, we're just getting the block. We've got the crank out, we're getting the block back on the engine stand so we can start putting things back together. Start putting the front cover on. The first one is a gasket here. We're just going to get the surface cleaned up good. And we'll put a little high temp RTV on there. now, before we put our camshaft in, we got to make sure we got it timed right. So on the camshaft gear, there's a mark, and on here there's a mark. There's 2 dots here, and I believe there's a single dot. There's 2 dots in line with a tooth here. There's 2 dots on the camshaft gear in line with a notch, and you put the two dots on the tooth lined inside the notch mark. Hold on to your hat, because I don't know if you're pointing at what I'm looking at or if you're headed off into no man's land. But here's the seal we got to put in here. Normally, if they're coated at all, that's the coating they designed to have on them for a sealer. You notice there's none on the front, and there is here. So we don't have to put anything on there. I mean, you can put Loctite on there if it's a bare piece of metal. That's going to go in there like that. I just need to get my seal driver. And I need to find it. I'm not sure where I left it last. I might have even put it back where it belongs. Yep, look at that, I did. So we need to find the one that looks like it's going to work in this seal. That one looks pretty good to me. I do have a hammer to tap that just to start it. There. Sounds good, looks pretty evenly seated. Looks like we're tight up against what's in here. I'm going to put a little oil on this. Don't need it right this minute. We'll put it on it. That's the harmonic balancer, actually your seal's on that, which is, hopefully you're still with me, which is this right here. This will go in, and then you can see I put the repair kit on here. You put some sealer behind it and you press this ring on, and that'll ride right on that. There was quite a seal groove worn in that. Of course, obviously the grade of the oil and the no oil changes in the dirt that was in the oil rolling around. got our piston direction and connecting rod connection and the scooper connection direction, I should say, all figured out finally. This is the front. On this piston, it's got a J on it. That's going to go toward the front. But the bigger thing is the number side. These are all numbered to match up your bottom connecting rod bearing. The number faces the cam, which goes down, which is the same thing the scooper has to do. The scooper has to point toward the cam. So it's going to be pointing that way. And then just to verify that, I'm going to go look at the oil pan. I want to show you that real quick. Okay, so here's the oil pan. And if you look in here, you see this rack and you see this hose. And you see these nozzles? They're all pointing up towards those scoopers. So once again, this is going to go on this way. Alright? So we need to make sure these are pointing this way. They're spraying this way and the scoopers are pointing that way towards the cam. So everything's good. Everything's kosher. So we're going to put this back now. Start putting rings on. Piston rings. I mic'd the pistons and I mic'd the cylinders, and believe it or not, they're all within the original standard tolerances, and so are the crank journals and the connecting rod bearings. We just want to give these a little coat, just to give them a little lube initially out of the box. Put a little on the piston. Okay, number towards the crankshaft, and that puts the J towards the front. We're going to turn that crank just a little bit to get the journal where we can get this bearing to write down onto it. I like them right about the bottom. Right in there. Brush over, put a little bit of this on our journal. We got some oil on there too. Alright, brought them over here. I don't know why I'm carrying it around so bad. So now we're going to set this down in here very carefully. We don't want anything to tear anything up. Gotta slide these down in there without scratching that cylinder. I'm going to drop that piston down in there as far as it'll go right now, which is right to there, which is what we would expect. And we're going to get our ring compressor. I'm going to set that right over the top of that piston. We're going to start tightening it. What this is going to do is it's literally going to compress those rings. So they'll fit down into that cylinder. Now we're going to do two things. We're going to take a wooden handled hammer or a fiber hammer, either one. I'm gonna be right in front of you. Well, I'll try it from here. We're gonna get control of that journal, or that connecting rod underneath, so we can guide it down over that journal. We're going nowhere here because it slipped up off. I gotta get this ring compressor on there a little better. We missed our target, boys, girls. Back this off a little bit. Come on. Push that piston up out of it a little bit more. I gotta kind of stand on this to get this to tighten up. Relatively square to start with. I'm trying to hold the piston up. Put the blades on the piston a little bit. We should be good. Sometimes you can give these a little love tap too. One more bite out of them. That looks a lot better than it did. Of course, we turned our piston a little bit. That sometimes can bite us, but man, we got a ways to go, so. We're still moving now. We got her down in there. Well, now it's down in there where the rings are in. Put our ring compressor over there. Put our hammer there. We might not need our hammer anymore. And then we might. Really need the handle anyway. Okay. These have shims in them. I want to try it once without the shims to see what happens. When we torque these with oil on the bolts. Sometimes you torque with dry bolts, threads, dry threads. Sometimes you torque with oil threads. These specify oil threads. Now, when I did the main bearings, it never specified dry or oil, so I went with dry. Okay, so the scooper goes toward the camshaft. Camshaft is there. So if we can do this with one hand tied behind our back. These bolts not cooperating. These nuts do go on one way. It's easy to tell because they have a flat, rounded surface on the one side that they don't have on the other side. Now, I'm going to tighten these by hand. I got to look the torque up just to make sure, but I'm just going to tighten them by hand to see if it locks me up. As it says, with these torques, I should be able to rock this back and forth on that journal, and I can still move it. But Okay, now I can't move it, so I want to see what the torque is again. See if I'm anywhere near it. 40 to 50 foot-pounds, which is not a lot. Forty to 50 sounds like 45 to me. There's 40. That's 45. Half-inch drive. 1/16. Go the deep well. See how close we are here. I might be there or might be beyond it. No, I'm not there. Number one, I can't move that. I bet I can't turn that crank either. So we'll have to put a shim in there. Which I think is quite amazing that, yeah, I can't turn the crank either, so. We'll have to go with at least a shim. I'm guessing probably 2 shims. Alright, got the oil pan torqued down. I believe I'm going to roll it